Okay, Billie, your presentation for the phonology exam is called The Four Corners, and it's about distinguishing long and short vowels. So,
yeah, that's correct. I invented a little game that I call The Four Corners, and it will help students to distinguish between long and short vowel sounds, because especially in Spain, Spanish phonology doesn't have that. So in the first set, because I have two different sets, the students will learn the difference between the long E and the short E. Before I introduce the game, I would obviously practice the sounds, give them some examples, let them come up with some example words. And this is the first pair, and then the second one is the long A and the short A. And once we've done that and the symbols are clear and the sounds are introduced, I ask for 4 volunteers. And they don't really know what's happening to them. They just volunteer. That's the idea. And then they each get a sound. And they stand in front of the class and they make their sound, and until we're happy that they get them right. And there's a difference between long and short, E and I, and A and A. And then I ask them to basically stand in one of the corners in the classroom, displaying their sound on this little sheet, and also making the sound every once in a while, not all the time, as a little reminder. And then I have these little cards, quite a lot of them, I think they're around 25, and each one has a word written on them, and it contains one of the 4 vowel sounds. And so I've shuffled them and I distribute them amongst the rest of the students, and they have to then go and put each of the words in the correct corner. And as a little reminder, the student with each sound card will make the sound every now and again. And so obviously this will, yes, and so the people holding the sounds are not passive, because their job is to make sure that all the cards that are placed in front of them on the tables are actually correct. And if they think, oh no, but this word here, for example, let's say the word believe is put under it, and the person thinks, no, this isn't correct, then they can send them away again. Okay, so they have some authority and active role in the game as well. And so I want this, because I want to encourage some discussion as well, and they have to say the words out loud to check. And so this will go on. Usually it's quite funny as well, and it's quite nice, because they really need to, they hear the sounds and they make them and they say the words and they have some discussions. And once everything, all the words have been placed, we stop the activity, and then we go around each station as a class, and we check the words, ask the students to read them aloud, and we check together if they're placed correctly. And so I have, this is the first set with E and I, A and A, but I also have a second set with U and O, and O and O. And these cards are over here, with a different set of words, obviously. Yes, and I think it's very good, because it really raises the awareness of the difference between long and short vowel sounds. And also, every time I played it with the students, I feel the students had this enlightening moment of like, I always thought it was this sound. Or for example, there's the word women in here, which a lot of students mispronounce, and they was kind of surprised to hear there's actually an I twice in there. So that is the game.
okay, thank you. Okay, some questions about that. I mean, you said that the students here in Spain have problems with these sounds. Can you talk a little bit more about tell me a bit more about what sort of problems they have? How do they get it wrong? I mean, what do they say instead of women?
Yeah, so the problem is really that in Spanish and also in Catalan, there isn't really a distinction between a long and a short vowel sound. And so instead of distinguishing between E and I, the student will probably produce something which is kind of in the middle of these two. And when we have words that are really homophones, like keys and kiss, there isn't a proper distinction, and the student might say something halfway, and depending on the context, that causes miscommunication or problems in understanding the true message and meaning. And so it's very important to, first of all, raise the awareness of the difference and give them, I think, a couple of exercises or games that help them to hear the difference. There are a couple of homophones, not as many because obviously there aren't that many, but there are a couple of those in the game, I think. And and so the same with and although this period, I think these two are the most important ones.
Okay. What will be some difficulties with and that they have?
Pardon?
What difficulties would students have with those sounds? What words would they get wrong?
I mean, again, it's just like the whole idea of, often the distinction here is maybe not as important as E and E, but quite often this one here is not pronounced long enough, or at least Spanish students, often the sound appears in words that are followed by R, and then it's overpronounced and it sounds very different. And also the problem with this sound is often it's spelled as a U and students mispronounce it. So again, this is maybe not so much about the distinction between the long and the short, although this is also part of it, but also about pronouncing these sounds correctly in the words.
Okay.
Because they're so different from their spelling.
What levels would the students be? Do you use it with all levels or particular?
I think you can, the words that I chose for this set here are fairly simple, so I think a pre-intermediate plus is fine. Of course, if you have an advanced class that struggles with these particular sounds, you can play it as well. For elementary or below, it's probably a bit difficult because some of the words might be too advanced. Like for example, you've got the word buzz here, and that I don't think a student at elementary will know, or maybe even, you can always adapt some of the words. You can make it fit your context and level. That's the nice thing. And you can use the same idea of this game also to practice other sounds. It doesn't have to be vowels, it doesn't have to be these specific ones. You could also choose consonants, for example, j and ch, because sometimes, or s and z.
And how would you, if a student was having problems, as you say, as they often do, distinguishing between the long and the short, and they can't, they're saying Pete, and you don't know if it's Pete or Pit, how would you help them to produce that sound?
Okay, so usually with the long E, because you kind of have to smile and really spread your lips, you can make it a more physical experience, because even if the student doesn't hear the difference, at least they can feel the difference when they make the sound. And in comparison then with I, where you kind of relax a little bit the lips more, there's a difference, and you can see the difference. So first of all, I think I would say, okay, just watch, my mouth, have a look if I look different, and then, let's listen to the difference, but then try and make the sound yourself and really spread your lips. So I think that is a good way to go forward with. If you don't hear the difference, at least maybe you can feel the difference or see the difference in the production. It doesn't work with all sounds, but with these two it would work quite well, I think.
And how do you find students react to using phonemic symbols? Because sometimes teachers are a bit cautious about that. They say, well, this is going to confuse my students. They're having lots of trouble with spellings in English, and now they see these symbols, they're going to get confused. What's your experience when you play games like this or activities like this?
I think it depends on the type of class you have. In general, if you have the class for more than 2 months or longer and you see them regularly, I think it's totally fine to introduce the symbols and the sounds as you go through the course, and preferably from day one, really. And you don't have to introduce the whole chart in one go, but I think you should definitely introduce the symbols that either from the sounds that don't exist in that language. Like for example, I don't have that one here. It's not part of the game, but that is a sound that doesn't exist in Catalan or Spanish, so I always introduce that one, and then you can point it out whenever you have you have new vocabulary with that sound. And also I think it is a good idea to highlight. I would use the ones for long and short sounds, and especially point out like the 2 dots, meaning that's a long sound, so that you can always highlight that whenever it comes up in a word or a little phrase or something, because that's really useful. Some of the sounds that are the same, do we have to use the whole, I don't think we have to necessarily introduce those. I don't think you have to transcribe the whole word for them, but using individual sounds to highlight, okay, this letter string is actually one sound and this is the symbol. Remember, we had E before, I think makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's the end of the first part of the phonology exam.